What's up? Doshi here. Today we're going to talk about Shorekeeper because this is a character I've been greatly anticipating and a character that has finally gotten a little bit of reveals today. Now we'll talk about what exactly she does for your teams. We'll talk about what she does as a standalone character. And we'll talk about what she does for your account long term versus some of those pre-existing options you may or may not already have on your account. Now, you guys are not stupid. You know exactly what Shorekeeper does as a character, so let's just hop straight into it, right? She is pretty much a Verina 2.0. Some teams she'll be better than Verina. Some teams she won't be better than Verina. It really depends on what you need in your team composition in the first place. But I would say having a second Verina just makes that character overall extremely valuable to have on your account. Because you've already seen the value of having Verina on any team you have in the game. She's super flexible. She gives you a ton of attack after healing them. And then she gives you a ton of damage bonus as well after healing them. And if you have some copies of the character, then you're also able to give your team a spectral damage bonus, which means she becomes even better in the same team with characters like, for instance, I guess future if you have like a Shorekeeper DPS build, but also Jinsei, who is a spectral damage dealer. And then Spectral Rover, for those of you that do use that version of the Rover as well. This is extremely valuable, especially in combination with the res reduction you do have on the Spectral Rover at his 6th copy, or his or her, depending on the type of rover you do have. So a quick TLDR for Shorekeeper over Verina, and the difference, or the main difference of the two rather, is that Shorekeeper is a character that heals, but also does damage and boosts your damage as well. There's going to be a Verina that does more damage. Verina doesn't really do that much damage unless you do have some higher resonance chains on the character, right? Your copies, your dupes, whatever you want to call it. Or if you have your Verina on a DPS build, which then you are negating some of her stats. Like for instance, you're negating maybe healing bonus if you don't have a healing bonus main, which is best installed on the character, mind you. You are negating some HP, some damage mitigation, right? Having the character be tanky so that she doesn't get one tap when she's on field for a few seconds. So that's the main problem with having Verina as a main DPS or having a Verina with damage, because you are negating a lot of the stats that she would need in order to function as a character that heals and buffs the rest of your team. But you gotta keep this in mind too, is that even though Shorekeeper does help you with staying alive also, right? Verina also does give you a shield and stops you from dying. This is a super valuable thing on Verina to have. And I do understand you need to have Verina at rank 4. So for those of you that don't have your Verina this far into the game, then you don't have this way of keeping your team healthy. And for teams like Donjin, or Donjin teams rather, characters like Donjin also, this is extremely good because this saves you the headache from having to run back and forth to heal up and revive your characters, if that makes sense. Now, with that being said, let's talk about Shorekeeper and what she does from her whole kit. So her basic attack deals 4 consecutive attacks dealing spectral damage, which is nice, is like Verina, nothing different. And then when you attack the target, you will generate 1 collapse core, which the collapse core is going to play a role into her kit overall, so we'll explain that in a bit. So when you hold down your normal attack, which is again a part of the base attack normal attack sequence, right? You hold down your normal attack, you will enter a release form, and this release form allows you to collect stuff around the map, which is very nice. But it also does give you a segment of speculative data every second, which we'll go into a little later in the video here. And then once you do press the normal attack again, you will end the release form and you will deal spectral damage to the target. So I don't know if you have been hearing about leaks and stuff like that, or if you heard a little bit of things about Shorekeeper in the past, but this is your way of traversing with the character. As long as it was, as the leak said, you're able to fly around with the character, turning into the speculative data, which is going to be the butterfly, I'm assuming, allows you to traverse around the map. Which again, if she does have that mechanic attached to the character, that would also be a very nice selling point over Verina. Although Verina, keep in mind, she does have a charge attack that allows her to move across the map extremely easy. Again, the best character to charge attack around the map, because aside from, having Encore Cheng Li with the lava boss that you can ride on the motorcycle to traverse that way too. But being able to hold down your charge attack and move around the map will allow you to traverse quicker, explore quicker, get your resources and gems quicker, and overall is a nice quality of life to the exploration of the game, right? But having a character that allows you to fly on top of that would be extremely valuable. So again, if this is the traversing mechanic of the character, this is definitely going to make her better than Verina in this regard. All right, so her skill restores HP for all team members, and then she summons 5 butterflies, and the butterflies will automatically track the target and deal spectral damage. You can also use this in midair, which is very nice. So I'm, again, assuming that this is anything to do with like Verina's skill, use Verina's skill, and then Verina then gives you 2 parts of the Forte circuit, and then you charge attack, and then that's the way of healing your teammates. Where instead you're just pressing the skill with a character and you automatically heal your teammates, which is a lot quicker than, having to use a skill and then use your charge attacks. And remember, if you do have variation on your Shorekeeper, which is most likely going to be best in slot, right? Because you're going to want the energy regen. You're also going to want the concerto energy gain too from using your skill. It will be a lot quicker with the concerto energy gain because you don't have to use your charge attacks on the Forte sector to heal up because you automatically heal up. So the swaps will be slightly quicker than Verina teams. But again, it really depends on how much extra concerto energy she does give. And you do take into consideration that Verina with dupe, I believe is dupe 2, she gives concerto energy with using the skill. That's also something to take into consideration as well. So with the Forte circuit, just like Verina does have the 5 stacks that you do get a max for the Forte circuit, which is the amount of charge attacks you are able to use and then heal up your team. Well, the Forte circuit of Shorekeeper is really no different. You're going to have 5 max stacks you can have on the circuit, which does play a role with the collapse cores you then get. The collapse core can then turn into a butterfly that then does follow your enemy and attack them and deal damage. And if you have a max Forte circuit, then all of those Forte circuits, or the collapse cores in this case, will then turn into more butterflies. So you'll have a maximum of 5 butterflies that'll then attack the enemy and deal damage. So this is the part where you're going to have a Shorekeeper that does more damage than Verina if you choose to build Shorekeeper that way. If you choose to build her as a hybrid healer and damage dealer, depends on how you want to play the game. Of course, I'm going to S6, E6, R6, whatever you want to call it, the character. So for me, she's going to be a DPS. But for those of you that are going to build her a sub DPS, do keep in mind that you are going to have more damage than Verina overall because you do more attacks. And also one thing to take into consideration, if she is able to deal damage off field, then she would be a lot better for Jinsei teams. But we have to wait and see with the other parts of her kit, which I'll explain in a bit. So TLDR, you deal normal attack to the enemy, and then the normal attack will then transform into a butterfly that will then attack the target after a certain amount of time, and that will then track the target automatically and deal damage, so it's a lock-on. And then if you have a max Forte circuit, those normal attacks will then turn the collapse core, or one part of the Forte circuit, into a butterfly that will then attack the enemy. So you have a maximum of 5 butterflies you can then have because you have 5 different spaces of the Forte circuit like Verina, if that makes sense. So we talked about the speculative data early in the video. The speculative data is what you're going to be using to build up your Forte circuit. And then once you do have a segment of actual data, which again, the actual data is a piece of the Forte circuit, you can cast your heavy attack to consume all of the actual data, which is again the Forte circuit, and then you'll deal spectral damage and you will draw in enemies nearby, which will pretty much be a Zhang Xing ultimate, sucks all the enemies into a vicinity like Venti, right? And then you will then have them grouped up and do your rotation, whatever you want to do. And again, since you are using your skill right here, because again, you're going to use your skill and you're going to build up your Forte circuit, you will have the concerto energy gain you need. And by the time you group in the enemies, you can then swap into your next character to deal damage. So this is going to be what most players are going to use from her Forte circuit, the way you're going to be playing the character, because the grouping is extremely valuable, especially for characters like Jinsei that needs the grouping to consistently deal the resonance skill damage to all the enemies, because her resonance skill has a pretty short radius compared to other characters, right? So whenever you are using the attack in mid-air and you have the 5 segments of actual data, which again is the max Forte circuit, you will generate all of the collapse cores into Flare Star butterflies, and those attacks will then lock onto an enemy, just like we had talked about earlier in the video with the Forte circuit and the Flare Star butterfly, right? So if you are using her attack in mid-air, it is no different. It's the same thing. Although it is nice the fact that this is a part of the character's kit nonetheless. So her inherent skills, which is going to be your passive abilities, goes as follows. One being Cycle of Life, when a team member suffers a fatal injury, they will not fall, but they will receive 50% of Shorekeeper's max HP, and then Shorekeeper will lose that same amount HP, but you can only use this once every 10 minutes. So we talked about this with Verina, and Verina is able to keep your team or your character from dying, which then means Shorekeeper is able to do the same thing as Verina, but this time it's a lot better because you are receiving 50% of Shorekeeper's HP, which again, if you take into consideration your Shorekeeper may have 30k HP, you're receiving 15k HP from the character, which for all DPS, most DPS, that's pretty much all of your health, right? Self-gravitation, which is going to be the second inherent skill of the character when Shorekeeper is in a team or the Stellar Realm is active, which the Stellar Realm is going to be the domain special. We'll talk about that in a bit. The team within the Black Shores area, the Shorekeeper's energy regen will be increased by 10%. And if you have Rover in the same team, their energy regen will also increase by 10%. So having the Spectral Rover in this case, because again, Shorekeeper deals spectral damage, the Spectral Rover does decrease the spectral resistance of the enemy. This will be very nice in combination with the energy gain you are receiving from Shorekeeper. It'll allow you to get your ultimate quicker, and then Shorekeeper already gets the energy regen. But if you don't have the Rover in the team party, don't feel like you're missing out on anything because you are only benefiting the Rover with the 10% extra energy regen and not Shorekeeper getting 20% instead of 10%, if that makes sense. Shorekeeper will always have 10% no matter who's in the party. However, if you have Rover in the team party with her, Rover will also get 10% energy regen. Now, when you use your intro skill, you will jump into the fight and then you will restore HP for all of your team members, and then you will summon 5 Dim Star Butterflies, which is not the Flare Star Butterflies. The Flare Star Butterflies are the ones that are going to deal more damage, but the Dim Star Butterflies will also attack and track the target. You'll summon 5 of those, dealing spectral damage, and this attack right here is considered Resonance Skill damage. So you're going to want to invest into the Resonance Skill of the character regardless, right? I mean, you want to do this with the fact that her Forte circuit does deal Resonance Skill damage, right, with the skill itself. And then you also are dealing damage with the Spectral Butterflies she is sending out, the Flare Star Butterflies. So you did want to use, Resonance Skill damage bonuses on the character. But this iterates the point even more, right? Having Spectral damage bonus on your Echoes is going to be very valuable for the character, more so than giving her a basic attack damage increase and all of that jazz, right? So when you have the domain expansion release Stellar Realm, which is the ultimate of the character, the intro skill will be replaced by Discernment, and Discernment will end the Stellar Realm, which is the domain expansion. You'll heal all of your team members, and you will attack the targets that deal spectral damage. So this is going to be a pretty big nuke. You'll heal your team, and then you will end the current domain expansion you have on the field. And then this is going to be considered critical resonance liberation damage. So on top of the spectral damage bonus you want to have, which will then be also calculated with the resonance skill. So you want the spectral damage bonus, you want resonance skill damage, and you also want resonance liberation damage because, again, she is going to be a character that deals more damage than Verina. And her multipliers are pretty decent right now. I don't really want to get too much into detail on the multipliers because this is something that will most likely change over the course of the betas, right? We have no way of knowing if this is going to be set in stone for the character, so I don't really want to talk too much about it, but the multipliers are looking fairly decent right now. Again, it is dependent on the HP of the character, so the more HP you have on her, the more you will deal, but again, just wait for the final product to be in place, and then we can talk more about it. Now, this is going to be the part of the character that essentially makes her competitive to Verina. If all of what I discussed already wasn't a way of keeping her competitive Verina, this is going to make her pretty much better than Verina in some ways. Now, what you do with your Resonance Liberation is pretty much summon a domain expansion, as I said before. You expand Elementary Stellar Realm, which is the domain expansion. You'll heal all of your team within the Stellar Realm. So no matter who you swap into, your team will all be healed over time, right? And this will be triggered every 3 seconds. So every 3 seconds, you'll get a heal for all of your team members, which is very nice. You're having a lot of healing, just like Verina does heal your team whenever you use the ultimate as well. It's the same thing, right? So that is the first part of the Resonance Liberation. Now, The sophisticated stellar realm is when you use intro skills on your other characters. So when you swap out of your Shorekeeper rotations, right, and then you swap into, let's say, Jinsei, then that elementary stellar realm will then evolve into a second domain expansion, and then it will be called sophisticated stellar realm. Increases the crit rate of all the team members dependent on the amount of energy regen Shorekeeper has. Again, I'm not going to say the numbers here just for saving my butt purposes, but you are getting quite a bit of crit rate for the team depending on the amount of energy regen you have on Shorekeeper, which is very nice. And you also do get all the previous effects before. So whatever you do have here, right, in all of the domain expansions, from the third to the second to the first one, from the third one, you'll have all of the second and first buffs, right, and heals. From the second to the first, you'll have all of the buffs from the second and all of the buffs and heals from the first, right? And the third released Stellar Realm is the name of it. This part of the ultimate is going to then give your team even more crit rate depending on the amount of energy regen Shorekeeper then has. So ideally, you're going to want your Shorekeeper to have a certain amount of energy regen, because the third part of the Resonance Liberation, the third part of the ultimate, gives you more crit rate for less energy regen that Shorekeeper has. So ideally, you're going to want to use your sub DPS after you swap off of Shorekeeper, and then from your sub to your main damage dealer. So in this case, Jinsei, and then you'll have the third ultimate. And then once you have the third ultimate, you'll get the most crit rate gain possible without having to have too much energy regen on a Shorekeeper. I'm talking like an unrealistic amount for every player, essentially, right? And then you'll keep all the effects from the second and first part of the ultimate. So she is a HP scaler, as I said earlier. So keep in mind, the more HP you have on the character, the more HP your allies will heal up, not only from the ultimate, but also from them dying, right? So let's say one of your characters dies, you'll have that 50% of Shorekeeper's max HP, which will then go to that ally. So again, she keeps you from dying. Although it is on a 10-minute cooldown, which sucks. It is what it is. It still is very nice to have nonetheless for those runs in the Tower Adversity, right? Once you use your outro skill on Shorekeeper, you'll summon 2 butterflies, one of the flare stars and one of the dim stars. And then those butterflies will then circle your team members for 30 seconds. And this 30 seconds window is going to be the buffs you do have present. So once you do have the flare star butterfly, the dodge button from a team member being hit will allow them to successfully dodge and land on the ground. So if you are brought into the air, let's say for instance Scar knocks you into the air, you're able to tap the dodge button, and then if you are being hit or juggled, you will successfully dodge the attack and land on the ground, which is very nice. And that will get rid of the flare star butterfly, right? And if you do have the dim star butterfly, you will increase all of the team members' damage by 15%. So this is like the damage bonus you do get from Verina for the team. It is no different. But overall, the outro skill is more valuable because you are getting the fact that you can dodge attacks, right? And this is up to 5 times, which is very, very, very nice. Very nice. Again, this is pretty much foolproof for players overall. If you are someone that has a men's skill issue like me and you constantly retry bosses over and over, I'm talking Scar, right? This will be very nice because this allows you to stop yourself from being juggled, being knocked up in the air, and you can safely dodge attacks without having to worry about much. And it also does work in a way of being a way of interruption resistance, right? Because let's say you are playing Jinsei, and this is another character that's going to benefit immensely from this. If you are constantly being juggled and constantly being attacked, being able to just dodge attacks will allow you to get your resin skill out on the field quicker, because you're not going to be frozen or stuck in place, right? You won't have to constantly tap the reset button to reset your run because your run is falling short based on time, right? I think overall this is very nice, and what this allows me to do then is take my Verina and put her in a different team altogether. But I really am curious how much better this is going to be than Verina, because although you are getting more crit rate to the team versus giving attack like Verina does give to the team, man, attack percent is super good because we don't really get too many ways of increasing attack in the game, right? The only real ways you have of increasing your attack is by either getting dupes for the character or getting attack percentage from your echoes. Verina giving attack is extremely valuable, and you also get attack from the Moonlit Echo set, right? From swapping off your sub DPS to your main DPS. I really am curious to see how much better the crit rate is going to be versus that. I will assume for a lot of you, the crit rate is going to make your runs a lot more consistent, especially your Jinsei builds. I know a lot of you do have high crit damage amounts and then very low, like bro, some of y'all have like 280 crit damage and then your Jinsei has like 50, 60 crit rate. I'm like, what the freak? But that's going to be the video here. We went over Shorekeeper's kit in great detail. Pretty much all I can think of saying for Shorekeeper versus Verina is a character that is Verina, but essentially does more damage and gives a buff that is more valuable depending on the type of player you are. Again, if you already have a bunch of crit rate on your characters, the extra crit rate you do get from Shorekeeper may add for a little bit more consistency. But if your runs were already super consistent enough, you may value that attack percentage slightly more. But also the fact that Shorekeeper does deal more damage than Verina, and the only way Verina does damage is if you have her on her 6th dupe, which then allows her to become a DPS because you deal 20% more damage with your heavy attacks, all that, and then the coordinate attack trigger one more time, stuff like that. And then it would also be equal to the amount of resistance of rage. Like, again, if you do have some of those dupes, she becomes a damage dealer. But if you are far from that point, then I suggest you invest into Shorekeeper, because not only do you have one Verina for one team, you have Verina for another team as well. And that's also a very nice thing. She'll also be pretty good in a team with Jinsei because you're able to get those buffs rather quickly. And on top of that, you are also giving Jinsei everything she needs, right? The successful dodge mechanic, which is extremely nice if you are fighting some of those very annoying bosses. Like, for instance, you're fighting Scar, who will then juggle you constantly. I think having that on your Jinsei will make her feel like a lot more of a smooth character. If you are using characters like Jian, you're not going to really experience too much of that, because Jian is a character that can successfully dodge without ruining his attack sequence, right? Characters like Cheng-Li is another best example of this. Although Cheng-Li is one of those characters, you're going to want to get used to how she plays as a character overall with her charge attack mechanic, or her attack mechanic, right? You do her 3-4 attacks, and then you get the passive, and then you dodge, and then you do the last attack, which gives you a stack of your Forte circuit. It depends on the character that is going to benefit the most from Shorekeeper, but having a second Verina is very, very nice nonetheless. And I did ramble for long enough, so we're going to end the video here. Thank you for watching, and have a nice rest of your day. More Wuthering Waves videos to come, because I need to make up some funds for my S6 Shorekeeper, which again, I didn't talk about her dupes in this video because I assume most of you are just going for one copy, maybe her weapon. We don't have details of her weapon just yet, but we'll talk about it later, of course, when we do get details. That's it. Have a nice rest of your day. Bye-bye.